Okay, good morning. It's time to learn and grow. I'm Alana, and I'm very grateful to be here today with Savannah Forgy. Savannah is a voice in alternative education, a Cole Summers Fellow, and an advocate who has firsthand experience in Montessori, public schools, and the Socratic way of learning. So first of all, thank you for taking the time to come out and talk with me today, Savannah, and
Thank you
welcome.
for inviting me.
Of course. So first I wanted to start. Can you talk a little bit about where you started? Like where did you go to school the very first time and how was your experience?
Yeah, so I started in a Montessori school, which is kind of funny because now I'm teaching in the same classroom that I would have been when I
Oh
very first
wow.
started.
That's
So
really cool.
yeah, I started in a 3 to 6 uh, children's house room. And then I went there all the way until I was 8. So I did it in this like small Montessori school. It only had a few students really. And it was a really close-knit community, but I feel like I did not realize what any other education was until I left there at the school's closure, just because the lady who ran it was she was like 70, I think like
Oh
5
wow.
when it closed down. So
That's
yeah,
pretty crazy.
definitely at the age of retirement. So that's why it closed. And then I went to a public school then.
Got it. Um, just so that I'm sure and everyone else who's watching this show, what's the main difference between a Montessori and a public?
So I think the most obvious difference is just looking at like the physical environment. There's a lot more that goes into it, but when you look at a public school classroom, some are set up differently, but just kind of what pops in mind for most people is desks and rows, and then there's typically like the teacher's desk up front, and then the whiteboard, and all of the things in the front of the classroom are for presentations to give to the whole classroom. Whereas when you walk into a Montessori classroom, it's often said that like you shouldn't even spot the teacher immediately. Like everybody's kind of working by themselves. They're free to roam the classroom and choose things off of shelves to go do. And then the teachers in the classroom are often on the floor working with a specific child, giving a lesson, or, you know, talking to a child about what they're going to be doing next. But really, they pretty much have this free choice of what they're doing all the time. And it's not, everybody's doing the same assignment at the same time.
That sounds awesome. I would totally do that. Does getting to do anything they want mean they can like learn how to build things instead of like doing math or social studies? Or is that kind of
I
necessary
would
as well?
say it kind of depends. Something that's been built out more recently in the Montessori space is the adolescent programs. And that's really interesting to see because that is really where it differs. But in Children's House, where I teach in an elementary, um, in Children's House, once again, is the 3 to 6 year olds, so very young.
Right.
And for them, it is like they have so much to choose from, but really where a lot of them start out is in something called practical life, which is, they can scrub a table, they can water plants, they can do pouring exercises and like sponging exercises. And then when they get more advanced, practical life continues. They can polish brass or they can
Oh, interesting.
sew a button. And like that's all something that's taught, or even how to just like zip your coats or um, tie tie the proper way. And all of that's part of practical life. So that's a big implement. But then they do things that are um, in subjects like mathematics and sciences. And then we have a section called sensorial, which is just all about like using your senses in different ways. So it's all of these materials that bring out different parts of your senses so that you can start at that young age differentiating what the sense is from the sense and getting a grasp on different ways to move around the world.
That's really cool because just saying I've never learned how to polish brass. That kind of sounds fun. And I guess at a younger age, there's really no need for lots of structure in like subject areas. I feel like I didn't do much when I was in kindergarten. So I guess that
Yeah,
makes sense. It's better to just let kids like learn how to do practical things. Yeah.
yeah, it does make a lot of sense. But that I do have to say that one of the best things I think about like the mathematics area is that they start with like knowing what different numbers are. So they know like how to, figure out what 1,342 is before they're able to add numbers, which usually it works the other way. But
Yeah.
they have materials that like demonstrate what that is. So we have like an 100 like beads that are put together, like 10 beads that are put together, just one bead, or 1,000 beads, and that way it's like visually present to them what's happening, which is very
So they
cool.
can like understand it.
Yeah, I think I've understood a lot of things since going back into the Montessori classroom as a teacher and realizing, like, oh, like I really never understood what, you know, the power of two was until looking at like the power of two cube, or like division suddenly like makes a lot of sense because of how you can see it on this like beat chart that they're doing.
Makes sense. I remember when I was learning like division in public school, they tried to like make it physical with like coins or something, but I can
Yeah,
imagine that exploring it for yourself would probably just be a lot easier and funner.
yeah.
Okay, so I know that Montessori works with students at a really early age, but does it work with maybe like middle school or would most kids have to transfer to like a public?
I think still in a lot of Montessori schools, it only goes up to a certain age. So they'll usually like stop at either six, which is like a kindergarten age, or they'll go up to like sixth grade, which is like 12
Oh,
year
wow.
olds.
Yeah,
But then there are some that are building this like I cannot talk, adolescent portion.
it's okay.
And I think that's really cool that there's some schools out there trying it. It's not something that Maria Montessori, like the founder, really worked on a whole lot besides like really one paper. Um, but I think that there are a lot of progressions. Like even TSC, I would say, is one of those schools that's taken a Montessori kind of driven atmosphere. And
Yeah,
it's of
that's true.
course very different because it's like into Socratic pedagogy, but like there's a lot of links between the two, and I think it really is an easy transition for a Montessori child to go into like a Socratic atmosphere.
Yeah, that would make a lot of sense. But you transitioned right into public, right? How was
I
that?
did. Yeah, I think at first I really did not realize like um what had changed. So I ended up getting like I was doing things faster than other students because I had learned by myself, and then like at other times I was just so confused about like raising your hand to go to the bathroom, like silly things
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
And then it was like a step down from the independence I had, but I didn't have any like really negative remarks. Of course, I was in the third grade when I started at public school.
Yeah,
And over time, I really did not think about it a whole lot. It just became routine. And you're working for the grade to get an A. And
yeah,
it was really only till COVID started and then I left public school that I like and went back to a Montessori atmosphere in middle school that I realized like, oh, this, was kind
it was a
of,
lot different.
yeah. And I think a lot of it too is like the memorizing and then forgetting it is a
Yeah,
lot.
oh, that happens to me a lot.
And I feel like, what's the point? Because if you're like learning in school, I mean, I guess you could say something about like work ethic or something, but I just remember so many nights that I would come home and be like so stressed out as like a little kid with the amount of homework
Oh,
I had.
oh, that's another thing I don't like. I went to like a public charter. They didn't give out homework, so I never like got to. understand that, but everyone I know hates homework. That's another thing
Yeah.
about public school that's different, huh?
Yeah, it is. And it's really interesting because it's like after having a full school day, now you're going to go home and do it by yourself. But I think really the reason for that is because you don't get to do anything by yourself at school. It's like always, with a teacher in a group assignment or something. So I think that's the issue, right? It's like they need to have some metric of like, how are you doing on this topic without any help from anything else?
So like they're kind of trying to integrate some sort of independence into the like dependent school system, right?
Yeah, it is kind of funny though too how I think earlier and earlier children are finding like ways to cheat the system though. And
Yeah,
I think it's like this natural reaction. It's like they don't want to do it because they spent a whole school day working, their brain and sitting through this many classes in a chair. And now they want to go play, which is like a very natural thing for a child. And then they have to do homework. And I do think like so many kids very early on learn how to go look it up. And like now the implement of like AI, I think so many
that's
kids
true.
just use that for
Yeah,
homework
and
answers.
it's so easy to that you can talk to it like I'm talking with you. That's kind of what I do, but I don't ask for answers, obviously.
Yeah,
That'd be
yeah,
cheating.
but it is so interesting because it's like it's there and I can't even blame them because, they're
It's
just like
free.
finding the like efficient path for what
Yeah.
their end goal is and they don't love what they're doing. I think like you really have to love learning to actually get something out of it. Or else it just kind of feels like I mean there's a thing to like disciplining yourself and like learning a new language or something, but I think you have to have some end goal that you want to achieve besides getting the diploma or the grade. And I think that's what's really sad about the education system.
That makes sense. I know you said that it helps for the kids to love learning, and that's something that I think I have at least a little bit in terms of like, oh, I really want to understand this. And I
Yeah.
didn't come from a Montessori background, but do you think that most kids in like Montessori schools have that love for learning, or does it kind of just come naturally?
Well, I think that it's very innate to a child to love learning. Actually, Maria Montessori called the um, earliest play the absorbent mind. So 0 to 6 is like the absorbent mind, which is so true. They absorb language and cultural norms and like all of the things that happen in society. And by the time they're 6, they're like able to do so many things in those short 6 years. But I think it's taken away from them when they enter school by this like forcing of learning. I mean, nobody likes to be like coerced into something. Um,
Yeah,
so I think it's like in the Montessori environment, what helps is that they do have choices. They always have choices if they demonstrate that they're able to complete that choice. So, um, some of the kids that are in the class that I teach really lean towards one subject in the classroom. And like that's totally okay. Some of them will spend the whole 3 hour morning work cycle just on like one specific material, which is great. They like get into like a flow state and they're like so into it. And I think that continues if you keep letting them have materials that they're ready to work on. But I think as soon as you take away their capabilities, then it's like just feels like, well, I don't want to do that. It's my mom told me to go and load the dishwasher. I already was going to, but now she told me, so I don't really want to.
yeah, that's true. I feel like everyone's experienced that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But for the kids who spend like the whole time on one subject, that sounds really fun and awesome. But when they happen to or need to like do others, do they have a hard time because they like really want to go back to that one thing, or because you've let them do it for so long, they're like, oh, okay, doesn't matter.
Well, I think for them, um, They are kind of allowed to choose for the most part, but then they're given lessons. And then I know in like elementary and Montessori elementary, sometimes they're expected to like go, they do have some sort of like classwork that they're expected to complete. Um, but like in a children's house classroom, they're given a lesson, so they're getting practice, usually every day with something. So like a lot of them will get lessons on like letter sounds. Um, And then they do that every day with the guide. But they don't really have to go get that work out by themselves because they're doing it with the guide. And a lot of children do love that, like one-on-one attention. So when they're
Yeah,
working specifically with somebody and it's a fun experience and it's not that long of a time, you're not going to like press their brain. It's just like 15 minutes working on letter sounds. And then they do that every day. It's a daily habit. And soon enough, they, know the whole alphabet. So,
that makes sense. And that is one of the things that even I at my public charter kind of noticed is that when you do things like one subject with everyone, like maybe 25 kids with one teacher as a group, it takes a really long time for like an unnecessary amount of time. Just
yeah,
because some people aren't listening to the teacher or they're not focusing, so they keep asking questions or asking for help. And some of the like smarter, focused kids were kind of getting dragged behind. And I love that that's not happening in a Montessori, right? It's kind of just public.
yeah, I've always thought it's like they try to aim for the median. Like, that's all really you can do when you have 25 students learning at the same time. But then you're cutting out the kids who just like completely don't understand. And now they think they're dumb because of it.
Mm.
And then
Yeah.
you even have kids crying in the classroom over that. And then on the flip side, those students who are so bored out of their mind because this is like way too slow for them that they end up like falling asleep in class. And then you have like the students that it works out okay, but it almost has to be one side or the other, I think. Like I've never been in a classroom that's like moving at the like right pace almost.
Yeah, that's true. And if that does happen, it's only because it has a really good group of kids that kind of can work together. Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense. So everything about Montessori is really, really interesting and public as well. But now, when did you transfer into TSE? And just for if you're listening and don't know what TSE is, it's like an online school that is centered on Socratic learning, so having discussions.
Yeah, so I actually in my seventh grade year, that's what uh is it the seventh grade year? No, I'm forgetting. It's been so long,
It's
but
okay.
that's when COVID hit for me. So I transferred um, that year and started online school at another school called Academy of Thought and Industry at the time, which used to be led by Michael Strong too. And then they recently changed names to Guidepost Academy, but I left that school to come to TSC a few years later. They did a very similar thing. They were maybe more Montessori based, but they had the Socratic dialogue implement, and it was all
That's awesome.
online. Um, and I did really like it there, but I just, saw things about TSC, and it really seemed like everybody was focused on the same track that I wanted to go down. So, um, I joined TSC and fell in love with that really quickly. I was taking philosophy, politics, and economics, and now I'm studying
That's
that in college. So
oh
that,
dang,
yeah, that
that's a great base.
transferred over for me um, as a sophomore in high school. And I loved doing it because there was the flexible, like you still had a very tight-knit community at TSC and many people you knew and were friends with. But then we had this like global community and you could learn about all these different cultures. And one of the greatest things was I got to travel a lot. So, like doing
Yes.
school online from like different places was really nice to have that flexibility too. And having these really rich discussions where you're learning about things through thinking in a very deep level. And I think it was challenging, but in the like way that you just like can't stop. Like it's very um like you want to do it. Like once you're in a Socratic dialogue, it's like it's enraptured you or something. It's like you're just so into it. And I felt so often like when classes ended, I was like, okay, that wasn't complete. Like I feel like I got somewhere, but oftentimes I got to a point where I knew less than when I started, and that was always a funny
Oh,
feeling. Well,
that's interesting.
I'll explain that because for me it's
Okay.
so much. I think of society is like I don't even want to put it as a total negative thing, um, but we think we know a lot
Yeah.
until it's kind of proven to us that well, even though this is like commonly thought as this way. There's other ways to think about it too. And now you're faced with the question, which way is the right way? Can they both be right? Like all of these questions. And I always felt like my questions aren't answered. Now I have more questions than I did when I was going into it. Might be a better way to put that.
That's true. But that just means you're learning about that and you're trying to know more, right? So it kind of it's
Yeah,
a good thing.
it's a great
That's
thing. Yeah.
awesome. Yeah. I remember having lots of great discussions at TSE, especially with my classmates. That was really fun.
Yeah.
And I know some kids just talking about the individuals, but some kids like you really, really, really thrived in that kind of environment. But some of them more like shy and withdrawn and not held back, but just not really vocal kids were
Hmm.
kind of just watching it on the sidelines. And I always wondered if they like just enjoyed listening or they just like were doing something else and weren't interested. What do you
Yeah.
think about those kids' experiences? Were you ever that kid? Probably not, but
Yeah, I think that's one of the difficulties of online education is that you are in a distractive environment because oftentimes you're in your own house
yeah,
or um you're on the road. Like I know a lot of people would like be in a car while online and I think
that
those
would be
situations
me.
yeah. Yeah, and I did that a lot too and it's like that situation always was like, okay, I'm not like fully here because of that. So I do think there are downsides and I think that generally a Socratic dialogue does work better when you're sitting in a circle in a physical space. Um, because then everybody like kind of is forcing themselves to be present versus this like, oh, I am going to turn off my camera because I'm in the car or something like that.
Yeah, that's
And
true.
yeah, I think a lot of people too just think, oh, online school, like that has to be easier. And then all of a sudden it's really not. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of conflict there. I do think some of the quiet people, though, really were taking it all in. And it was impressive sometimes when one of those quiet people kind of came out of their shell a little bit and just like told you like the last 5 months of, discussions and kind of like this long passage they're just saying out loud and they're like, well, this connects to this and this connects to this material we looked at and you're like, oh my gosh.
You
Like,
were paying
I
attention.
yeah. So yeah, I think that there is beauty in just like listening. But I think there's also I always recognize that when I force myself to participate at the like first 15 minutes of a discussion, then I was like drawn in the rest of the discussion. Whereas if I just kind of sat there, then I like lost track of the discussion, or at least
Yeah,
it like I could kind of follow, but I couldn't follow quite the way as if I was thinking about it as somebody was asking me a question.
that makes sense. And I guess sometimes it varied for me. Sometimes I was like really energetic and talking, but other times I was kind of quiet and reserved. And I completely would agree with you. If I wasn't like listening or engaging a little bit, the first couple minutes and I did lose track and I wasn't like if the teacher asked me a question, I wouldn't be prepared to answer. I guess if that makes
Yeah.
sense. But um, anyways, yeah, thank you for sharing your opinion on that. And I'm gonna ask this because I'm curious and not in high school yet. But when you were in high school and in TSC, did you or what were the discussions based on? Were they still based on like articles and passages, or were they kind of just more free since you guys are older?
Yeah, I think that every good Socratic dialogue that I've ever been in has been on something specific. So like some source of media, usually a text. I would say that the text got a lot more complex. So something that changed for me was that a lot of times we would pre-read it and then we would read it together in class and then like take it almost line by line or a few lines at a time and then discuss it, which definitely helped break it down into this like manageable portion.
Yeah.
So,
Would you and just by text do you mean like books or articles and that kind of thing?
yeah, a lot of what we worked on was ancient texts. So they were very difficult because it's like written across many miles and then many, many years. So it's a very different culture. Um, but then really thinking about, well, what could they mean by this? And not just taking the second source for it, which I think is very neat because you come to these revelations and like aha moments through that.
Yeah.
And it feels so satisfying once you get over something that at first you read and you were like, what? That doesn't really make sense. And then it comes to a point where you like really understand what the author is talking about, or at least you have your own takeaway from it.
Makes sense. And I guess that makes sense as you get older and in high school the text would get a lot more complicated, probably older and just more complex. But yeah, that's interesting. Thank you for sharing. And just because you mentioned that you're studying in college right now, right? I'm wondering, do you think that TSE and being online and doing like a different schooling in high school than most kids, do you think that better prepared you for college than it would have if you were in public, or do you think it had some drawbacks since you were online?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to an online college right now that kind of values similar things. Um,
Okay, got it.
However, it is set up in this grades, like everything is graded. Um, and for me, I have to say that it's very like I do all the extra credit time. It's like I can't even think of like not
Nice.
doing that
That's awesome.
because it is, but it's also like I've just been in this kind of Socratic system for so long that like of course I'm gonna try to like do my best on everything. And there's no like, well, this B will pass and get somewhere.
Yeah.
So um I end up spending a lot of time that I think other people usually don't on it and really dig into it, which has its benefits, but also is like I work full time and part time, so then it's a
Yeah.
little bit burnt out at the end of the week. But um, I do think that there are benefits, like especially on readings and on writing, that TSC prepared me for. But on the more structured things, like mathematics or like how to cite an APA,
Yeah.
um, how to think about grading systems and um, other things like that, quizzes, tests, and all of that. It's like I have no idea on. And I think I've been doing pretty okay, but it also is like stumbling because I don't think I've ever taken finals before, ever.
Oh
And
yeah.
usually that's something that like you start as a freshman in high school, I think. And I never took it because I like passed over all of that because I was in the seventh grade when I last went
Oh
to
wow.
traditional
That's right.
education.
Oh, I've heard of finals and it sounds kind of stressful, to be honest. I've never
Yeah.
done one like that before, but it's kind of funny that you mentioned that because after I sort of left like the regular GSC classes, I switched to like a system where I get graded and I have to write essays and things like that.
Yeah.
And I did have to cite things in my essay, and I got like a 50% because I didn't cite anything because I didn't know how to do that. I didn't know I was supposed to do that. So I
Yeah.
got to change it, but that was just an interesting experience for me. It was just a lot different.
I still have to look up like how to APA cite something because for me, I spent so long just like using ancient texts that you really don't have to cite because it's like when you're talking about something like the Bible, you're it's
What are you
very
gonna cite?
yeah, I think like you could cite like what verse it was and like all of that. And I did, but it's like I just wrote it in the sentence. Like I didn't have any like um parenthetical or anything like that.
That makes sense. Yeah. And also another thing about like the setting thing that you mentioned is that at TSC and at really none of the schools that I ever went to, I never really had to take a test. And now I don't think that's a bad thing because I do find in tests that I have to take now. Um, did you ever have to do things like that, or did you find that you just had to do it later?
Yeah, at TSC I really never had to do any sort of test. There were some final assignments, but it was like writing, an essay, which was fun, honestly, to kind of reflect on things. Um, but I do think that that's something I'm very unfamiliar with is that, especially if tests are timed, you can't sit there and think about it. You just have to like go with your
Yeah,
gut. And I think being in a school that was like, let's sit there and really think about it instead of just like always going with our gut kind of programmed me a bit to be like trying to like think deeply about every A, B, C, or D answer.
that makes sense. But I'm sure, like you mentioned, time tests. I'm sure that took up a lot of time too, right?
Sorry, with what?
That's okay. Did that take up, or I know you mentioned time tests. Did that take up a lot of time? And I guess thinking about all the answers instead of just kind of going with the one that you see is correct right away. I'm sure that just takes longer than normal, but I'm sure it's better though.
Yeah, I mean, to clarify, I like TSC, I never took a test. So then what I'm kind of explaining is that like now being in college and having to take quizzes and tests and them being timed, it's hard for me because I at TSC was always thinking deeply about questions. So then it's like there's this question and four answers and I want to think about each one. And you really don't have the time to do that. You kind of have to like just know the answer.
That makes sense. And I would assume that thinking deeply about each of the answers is probably better than just choosing the right one, but I don't know. What do I know? Okay, so that was really, really interesting. Thank you for discussing. This is going to be a totally different topic, but can you talk about the whole summer fellowship? I honestly don't really know what that is, and I'm really curious.
Yes, it was a lot of fun. It's ran through Foundation for Economic Education. And I first heard about them through my PPE class. So that's politics, philosophy, and economics class I took at TSC.
Thank you.
And um, we read some articles off of there. And I did find their site like something where a lot of articles just made sense. So I started reading a lot of the articles, and then the Cole Summers Fellowship popped up, and I had three people within like an hour send me it, like, you should apply to this. And I was like, I already saw
Oh,
it. Like,
wow.
I know I'm applying. But it was new that year. So I was on like the flagship team, and it was a great experience. It's around writing and marketing, but for specifically kids who or adolescents, so teenagers who um, were in alternative education and or are in alternative education, and to write about their experience of going to alternative education and share it with people because people like the first hand experience. It's like parents can talk about their kids' education and try to convince other parents to send them to a school like
Yeah.
TFC. But then there's really nothing like a child saying, I love the school that I go to, or I love the education that I've had at especially the teenage level. So that was kind of what the fellowship was trying to promote was these teenagers who loved school and were going to an alternative program and to write about it. And it really did get me connected with some people that are uh, still amazing. And I really look up to, shout out to Hannah Frankman and Lola Alguire, who are two incredible writers that kind of mentored us through the program. And it's still going on um, annually. And I really do love, they have some other programs that I really want to sign up for too, but that one really got me started on writing. And I always think I want to do more writing and never do, but it was a structured program. So that really helped with just getting it done.
That's awesome. That sounds like a really, really interesting and fun experience. Just because I was wondering, is a fellowship kind of just like a group or like I don't know what to call it, but is it like a group where people just come together and write, sort of?
Yes, so I think we had two meetings, one on Wednesday and one on Thursday nights. So the first would be talking about a skill that they specifically had to share. So it would be on all sorts of different things, but it would be on writing skills and social media skills. And then on Thursday, it would be like a workshop where you went and you wrote. And then there would be a few hours that you spent outside of the group time to write an article and really finalize it, which was awesome to just, it's not that heavy of a workload. But you had those two meetings to kind of think about what you want to write about and get started on it.
That makes sense. So I'm not gonna call it like a class or school, but it's sort of like a program that you can apply for. Um, okay, makes sense. Um, just out of curiosity, where can we read the articles that you guys wrote?
So everybody published on Substack, which
Oh,
is,
okay.
I'm assuming you're familiar with that.
I think so. I think I read a couple of your and or other people's articles from Substack.
Yeah, which is really great. It's free. You could pay for some articles, but it's just an independent publishing company, basically website. So you go and publish your own things. And then if within the Cool Summers Fellowship you really have something to write about that is in alignment with fee um, in their website, then they'll also publish yours. And then you also have the opportunity throughout the fellowship to go and reach out to other publications and try to get your work published, which is great to have like a portfolio at such a young age. Um, for me, being on the initial team, I think there wasn't as many opportunities because it was growing. Um, and kind of figuring itself out. It was still an amazing fellowship, but I think it's becoming even more where they're putting your name out there and getting you to be someone that has presence online and shares about what they're doing and their unique approach to education and other hobbies.
Awesome. Wait, so you were on the very first one ever?
Yes.
That's really, really cool. So I know that they would write about alternative education and just their student specific, but were there any other topics that they would write about? Or was it mostly just that?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely geared around that. Foundation for Economic Education is more on like philosophical things and of course economics. Um, and I do really recommend their articles that they write, but what they're trying to do through this fellowship is promote alternative education that's like market run. So it's a choice that parents have, and they're trying to promote that um, parents have these choices and, or really students have these choices to go to different schools. And it doesn't mean that you have to live right next to some, you could, there's many online schools that offer really alternative and helpful, enriching environments.
That's awesome. I'm definitely gonna go take a look at some of those articles. They sound really interesting. And maybe even at the Cool Summers Fellowship. I love writing, so maybe that would
It
be
would
fun for
be
me.
so awesome. They would love someone like you, Alana. I think that you would be a perfect fit, and it really does hold you to a standard, which is nice too. I think that's one of like the things that all writers can relate on is that like writer's block and then the
Hmm.
procrastination that you get. You're like you have ideas. I have like a list in my journal of like all these articles I want to write, and it just like really never gets done because, it's
That's me.
something outside of, homework comes first and whatever. But if you have the opportunity, it's a great fellowship.
Okay, thank you. That's awesome. Two more things. One, I know we were talking a lot about like online school and homeschool or whatever, but do you see more people or more kids in the future kind of reverting to that from public, or do you think it's kind of just gonna stay the same?
Okay, I'm a little bit confused by your question. So you're asking if people are going to keep coming into alternative spaces or it's going to stay the same? Is that your question?
Basically, do you think it's gonna grow?
I do. Um, I think actually you could look at trends throughout the last like 5 years or post-COVID really, and it's grown a tremendous amount because I think so many people came or so many students came home and started doing Zoom on school, and then of course their parents were home too, and they got to listen in to what their kid was working on. And I think a lot of them were like a little bit terrified by how much was happening in just kind of the wrong direction. And I do think to give a little bit of grace to that, it was so difficult because they've never done something like Zoom before. So it was
Yeah.
very chaotic. However, I do think it showed kind of the environment that public school has too. Um, so I don't know. I think that there has been a lot of growth out of that from parents realizing things. And then I think it's a snowball effect. Once some parents start to do it, they're the guinea pigs. It's like your
Yeah.
parents, my parents took a chance really on something new and adventurous, and different. And then they share their experience, the students and their parents do. And I think it shares over time, um, how great different models can be. And like every child's different. So it really works well to have lots of different kinds of education, or at least an education like Montessori that allows you to choose and have the independence.
That makes sense. And just about the guinea pig thing, that's 100% true because just at least in like my community, after I started homeschooling, a bunch of my like wrestling and jujitsu friends, they were like, "Oh, Alana homeschooled? Okay, we're gonna try that." And now I have like this little circle of friends that are all homeschooled, and we all meet up sometimes.
Yeah, that's
So
great.
that's fun. Yeah. Awesome. So thanks for that. Um, Last thing, do you have one general piece of advice that you would give to any new homeschooler, alternative, or participation, or anyone who's participating in alternative education? What advice would you give them just for the future?
Yeah, I think that this is an advice piece more geared towards parents, but um
It's fine.
towards adolescents too, is that you really have to dive in to it and experience it. It's like hard to choose it because you're nervous. It's not what you did as a kid. So is it something that you should send your child to? But in reality, if you sit them there and like a month later, it's like not working, then you can always go back. You know, there's always that option. So I think trying something new is a great way to step outside of comfort zones and really take a chance that can be very rewarding. Like you increase your skill level in public school, but I think just not at the level that you can when you're given the independence and um, autonomy in a lot of alternative approaches.
Awesome. That's really interesting. Thank you for sharing. Well, that's all I have. If you had anything else to say, you can say it now. But thank you so much for coming on, Savannah. That was really, really interesting. And you made me really excited about my school. Can't wait to get back on Monday.
Yeah. Thank
Um,
you so much, Alana, for inviting me. I've been a long time since I've talked about this, and I'm happy to talk about some of it again.
Thank you. You seem like you remember it very well.
Yeah.
Um, Thank you so much for teaching me about all this kind of stuff, and I hope you have an awesome day. I'll see you later,
Yes.
so Savannah. Bye.
Bye.